Big talking point of the last few days. Today, SA Tourism hit back at criticism over a planned deal with English Premier League football club Tottenham Hotspur to promote South Africa. Acting CEO Themba Khumalo confirming the deal was at an advanced stage and that they remained committed to it. He says it has provisional approval from the SA Tourism Board, has yet to get the approval of the Tourism Minister. Meanwhile, our London correspondent told us a little earlier in the show that President Ramaphosa's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, had communicated to him that it was not true that the president favoured the deal, nor did he favour spending so much money in this way. So I guess it all boils down to, will SA Tourism get bang for their, our buck? Let's unpack this now with sports editor at ENCA Vata Ngobeni, and also we're joined by sponsorship specialist Kelvin Watt. Good evening to both of you. And Kelvin, I want to start with you. Listening to what SA Tourism had to say, explaining that they really did believe in this deal, that promoting South African tourism and international tourism to South Africa was critically important for our economy, that he had a budget to spend on exactly that issue and he wasn't going to be ashamed of it. Do you think that that has put to rest some of the concerns about this deal?
Look, I mean, it sounds like they've done some due diligence on it. I think, we have a better understanding now that the money that was set aside had to be spent outside of the country, and I think people are beginning to learn that. I think there's still major concerns because it's a huge amount of money. There's probably not a sponsorship emanating from South Africa that's even half that. So it's certainly an enormous amount of money. Certainly as a sponsorship industry, it'll be very interesting to see what the plans are from an SA tourism side to take the rights and benefits that have been given them as part of this deal and how they activate and leverage those around the world. Typically any sponsorship investment at a rights fee needs at least the same, if not double that amount of money to really activate it and get the best from that sponsorship. So, that's meaning that if this is costing £14 million, they're going to need somewhere between 14 and 28 each year just to make this thing work, to get the sort of returns that you would expect from a sponsorship investment.
So you're saying it actually, it was interesting talking of the money. This is one thing I wanted to ask you about. He was saying for the nearly 1 billion rand investment over 3 years, there is going to be an 88 billion rand return. Now, he didn't explain his working out. How do you work out that you're going to get that much back?
My guess on that, he wasn't very particularly clear on what the metrics were for that value, but my guess is what they're looking at is for media value for logos and exposure, whether it be the shirt sleeve branding that you're going to see, the perimeter board advertising and those sort of elements that they're going to see around the world. Now, obviously, the Premiership is broadcast all over the world into a number of markets, so as a pure out media buy, it is a very, very good buy. I think the big question in the sponsorship industry is what is the objectives of SA Tourism and how do they expect the awareness that this drives to turn into tourism? Simply seeing a South African flag on the sleeve or messaging on electronic boards is going to have to do a lot of work, and a lot of really top-class creative is going to need to be done to get that sort of return. It's not like South Africa struggles from an awareness problem. Certainly from the sporting environment, certainly from football fans around the world. We've hosted the biggest show on earth. We've got 2 World Cups we're hosting again this year. So it's not like we're a country, people are trying to equate this to Rwanda. Rwanda is a very small East African country that's had very little in the way of sport tourism. Even as a tourism destination, it's pretty limited in what it has to offer. As a country, we've got more more tournaments on the European tour in golf. We're hosting 2 World Cups, and in fact, we have an under-19 World Cup this year. We've got an indoor hockey World Cup next week taking place. So I can count 4 World Cups we're hosting this year. There's a Masters rowing coming. So it's not like we're not getting that type of media presence around the world and in key markets like the United Kingdom, like Western Europe, like India, Australia, New Zealand, even into Asia and North America.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you saying, Kelvin, is there's not enough detail to show us that eyeballs will equate with actual returns. And, you know, while their job is not to fix Eskom at SA Tourism, they're going to have a campaign to counter the negativity. I mean, you clearly are sitting in load shedding this evening. That's one of our major problems. It's an absolute crisis. We have this ongoing crime problem. Those are very difficult issues to deal with when you're trying to promote a country. I want you to think about that just for a moment and bring Vata in here, because Vata, you and I chatted last night and we hadn't heard from SA Tourism. What's your response to what Themba Khumalo had to say? Did he allay a lot of your concerns or not really?
Sally, for me, what was extremely worrying was the way he spoke down, first of all, to South Africans, and how he just shouted at us, you know, and not giving much detail. You know, and the lack of empathy as well to the real concerns that South Africans have raised about this deal. It's not a case of saying that, you know, we shouldn't be marketing our country, you know, and we shouldn't be sponsoring events, especially sporting events, because South Africa is one of the major sporting host nations, at least the premier one on the continent itself. Is also being empathetic to the reality of South Africans is that we don't have power. Yes, we're riddled with potholes. We don't have water. We've got a crime crisis in this country that's second to none. So in the manner in which he just delivered that he carried himself in the press conference, it lacked a lot of empathy. And then when he started speaking, getting into detail about how they came about this, the biggest concern for me was that you never at any point spoke to the private sector when it comes to tourism industry, especially the guys that deal with sports tourism or in sports sponsorship. You know, they would have given him, I think, a lot of insight. Calvin has already mentioned the events that we're hosting in South Africa this year. Yeah. You know, and don't forget there's a little matter of a Rugby World Cup happening in France, of which South Africa are the defending champions. What the Springboks have been able to do with their brand and the Siya Kolisi brand, they've broken into the American market. There's a lot of interest in rugby in Asia. And we talk about, we just recently had the Hockey World Cup in India. You know, you could have branded that hockey team there, and that Indian market that they speak about, that they want to get into. You could have, again, advertised South Africa there with the game or sport that they really, really love. So for me, the way Themba Khumalo really handled himself today and how he just spoke down to the people, it lacked empathy, but more than anything is understanding where the anger actually comes from.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Kelvin, I want to bring you in again. We were talking about that issue of, you know, South Africa is not that easy to market. We all know about South Africa, and you, in fact, were also telling us yesterday about, Vata, how many sporting events are coming to South Africa, which is fantastic news. But we cannot get away. Yes, they may see, oh, look, South Africa. Let's remember South Africa. As soon as they start researching, they're going to find out about the crime problem. They're going to find out about load shedding. Doesn't it require more sophisticated marketing than what's being proposed? And let's be fair, we don't know all the details, but doesn't it require a more sophisticated approach to counteract those very real narratives out there?
Absolutely, and I think one would just hope that whatever, you know, marketing assets have been packaged into the sponsorship deal will be able to be leveraged by SA Tourism to do that job. And it's not to say that those assets may not be there. I think, you know, to Vada's point, we don't quite know what the detail is. So it's you know, I'm a massive believer in the power of sponsorship as a medium, but I also understand the shortfalls of it. If you don't use the assets correctly, you don't leverage those opportunities against very, very specific objectives that you may have and against very, very specific communication tasks that you have. Now, shirt sleeve branding and even, you know, LED branding is not going to necessarily do that job. And, you know, maybe there's things in there. They speak about training camps in South Africa. Maybe there's matches that we're going to see played here where Spurs are going to come out and people are going to come with them. And that is one way of showcasing that, you know, even the best footballers in the world, some of the biggest teams are happy to come to South Africa. When they're here, they're well looked after. These are the places that they train. You know, all those benefits that we did get out of hosting the World Cup back in 2010, that we hope to get out of hosting a Rugby World Cup in 2027 again, is bringing people here and realizing the, you know, just the extraordinary tourism opportunities that exist in this country. And, you know, I think that's one of the ways when I look at some of the World Cups we've had, the SA20, if tourism was packaging content into our global broadcast, I think sometimes we could get a much stronger message across, because we certainly don't struggle for awareness. In fact, when it comes to awareness, we probably punch way above our weight division in the world. What we struggle with are perceptions. And I think that's, again, you talk about the Khaleesi story, all these others. That's really what makes South Africa special. It's those type of stories, those type of characters, the Springboks, with all the problems we have in South Africa, that in 2019 we can go to Japan and win the World Cup. And that's, for me, where I think a bit of the lost opportunity exists.
Yeah, you're making a very interesting point. Wouter, some of the things Calvin's saying, some of those sort of more nuanced approaches to selling South Africa, so, maybe bringing Tottenham Hotspurs out here. Do you think, would that make it more palatable in your view?
I think for the sports lover, yes, Sally, it will. But this is South African tourism. They're not South African sports. They're not SASCOC. And one thing about the tourism industry that has taken a massive knock. How do you then put together the tourism sector along with the sporting sector? And that's why I said there's some low-hanging fruit. I speak about the Formula E that's coming at the end of February. That is probably the second biggest motoring event to Formula One. And there's talk of Formula One coming back to South Africa. Why not use the township economy and the Western Cape tourism as well to make sure that you leverage of those sporting events? And the same with the SA20, with the Women's Cricket World Cup, that's happening next week in South Africa as well. So, I think SA tourism, when they want to speak about sport, they should make sure that they put people like Calvin in the room to make sure that they can put the sports tourism along with the business of tourism, put them together to ensure that they can really leverage. Me watching Tottenham,
of course,
I think not too many South Africans are Tottenham fans. You speak about Manchester United, I said yesterday, Man City, Liverpool. You are really drawing some big crowds.
But, the point you're making is such an important one, that you have to start consulting widely on this to get really great nuanced ideas. Like, hey, maybe we could do this. There's this fantastic event. And when you start getting on a creative buzz like that, suddenly these wonderfully creative ideas come about. Calvin, I have to ask you to talk us through, there's two issues. I want to know your view on the price of this deal, which is hard to comment on because we don't know all the nuances, but just a sense, if you could. But also the timeline process. We're hearing that this deal was first discussed in August. It seems no one was really consulted beyond SA Tourism. How feasible is it that Tottenham Hotspur, according to our correspondent in London, was actually planning a media announcement this week and has hastily put it on hold? How feasible is it that it had got to that stage without complete sign-off from everybody, including the minister?
Look, I mean, certainly from a timeline perspective, we typically find that major sponsorships, and this is certainly right up there in the big ones, takes anywhere between 6 and 9 months to bed down and get all the detail processed. So one would hope during that time that South African tourism has consulted widely with various experts in the marketing world, research analysis, and done all the work that they needed to do. Certainly, the acting CEO seems to have said they've done that. We obviously we don't have sight of that, but, so it's very hard to comment on the work that's been done. From a pricing perspective, reportedly it's at sort of £14 million a year, I think. The Rwanda deal is reportedly £10 million for a very similar deal. Now, again, from the sponsorship industry, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the rights and benefits are identical. So maybe there are additional rights and benefits packaged in, but it's very hard to see, as Wouter said. Spurs are certainly not in the big four of English football or of world football when it comes to the Premiership and their following, that you would be paying a 40% premium against an Arsenal for what looks like a similar deal. Although, and again, I do want to reserve judgment because I don't know what rights and benefits are included. And it may be, that SA Tourism has really negotiated some wonderfully useful additional rights and benefits which they plan to leverage.
Yeah, pity they didn't tell us about that today, if that's the case. Final question to you, Calvin. If you were given nearly R1 billion and told and asked, how would you spend it to get international tourists back to South Africa? Is this the route you'd have chosen or not?
Look, I don't quite understand, because they speak about the mandate that this money has to be spent outside the country. And again, I don't understand that. I'm not a politician. I don't work within government. So, that it really depends. Personally, I would spend it on our national teams, on our sports people. That if we decided that sport was the route to go, obviously, and that's really the only place that I can comment, because that's my area of speciality. With these World Cups, with SA20, I've always been a massive believer that, I have no doubt today, that somewhere the Springboks on the back pages of newspapers all over the world, individuals, we have great mountain bikers, golfers, these wonderful events. I really believe that when we showcase South Africa at its best is when we show it off for, surfing events along the coastline, the golfing events that we have, the Formula E. It actually slipped my mind earlier when I was speaking. They're going to be racing around, Cape Town as Varta said, this, the second biggest motorsport, property on earth is coming on the 25th of February. So with all of these wonderful opportunities, I've been watching this SA20 with, and there you see, these sunsets in Cape Town as it goes down, and you see people just gushing about summer in Cape Town, and everyone's sitting in winter in Europe. Well, I can tell you there were certainly people in England sitting up and noticing that during this cold winter compared to, a Steve's concert, in my view. So that's where I would be spending it.
Yeah, okay, Kelvin, thank you. Vato, last quick comment from you. Themba Khumalo said it's not a sports thing, but obviously it involves sport. Do you think this is something that we need to hear from the sports minister as well, or do you think really the ball is in the court of the tourism minister now?
No, I think the sports minister should stay where he is at the moment, and that's dealing with flagpoles and orchestras and so on. But I think, again, to Calvin's point, we are a destination, a sports destination.
We could niche ourselves even more.
The Cricket World Cup is coming in 2027. We're bidding for the FIFA Women's World Cup, in 4 years' time. And if that happens, and the AFCON might be coming here because Guinea is doubtful at the moment. So you just look at those events on their own and the amount of tourists they bring with them.
Yeah.
It's for me, Sally, I think SA Tourism has missed something here. And hopefully going forward, they will sit down with the private sectors in tourism and also in the sports industry to make sure that when these opportunities come along, and they happen on a yearly basis in Africa, the Cape Town Cycle Tour, the Two Oceans Marathon, the Comrades Marathon, I can go on and on, about these events. And these are international events that, a lot of the world, the big broadcasters come. Fox in Australia is broadcasting the SA20. You're sitting with Sky in the UK as well. So, the opportunity is there. SA Tourism has just got to consult. Yeah. I think all stakeholders would be excited at this opportunity and actually helping in making sure that this brand South Africa, when it does go out there, goes out with our national teams and with our top class sportsmen and women in this country.
Yeah, because you know what? Despite the problems we have, there's so much to celebrate. And perhaps we could work on a campaign that really has a nuanced approach to reminding ourselves and the world of that. Martin Ngomeni, Calvin Watts, thank you very much to both of you for chatting to us this evening.